Testing, testing. No? Is that better? Okay. All right, awesome. Can you hear me now? All right. So when you get out of here, go over there to Hackers for Charity, and please support that that group of guys. I don't know who got to see Johnny Long's keynote. All right, awesome. So make sure you guys support them. Let's kick DEF CON's tail again. All right, and let's keep that tradition rolling. So just an introduction to what we're going to do here. The goal is to provide meaningful information about testing in virtualized environments, what your options are, to show you that it's easily attainable to set up an environment that you can test in, and for some reason, this basic level of a talk is usually often overlooked, and I don't know why. But this talk was actually initially presented at Appalachian Institute of Digital Evidence at Marshall University, and for students, because year after year they kept asking, how do I even get started? Like, what do I do to get into this? Because I can't do Shodan because that's kind of illegal, and I don't know really where to get started. So that's who this was initially geared for, and so there's that disclaimer. I have modified it severely, so there will be a few memes, and that's hopefully to keep you guys awake this early in the morning. That being said, this is not an O-Day talk, all right? There's no advanced exploitation or anything like that that's going to be taking place here, so if that's what you're looking for, you should probably go see Egypt. If you're into the web space, go check out the other guys' talk. This is an introductory talk. It's to get you started in a virtualized environment. Hopefully, everyone will be able to take something away from it. But it's not an advanced exploiting. It's not a sexy red teaming talk. Okay, this is how to get started. I'm a big proponent of the path of least resistance. So there are multiple ways to do this, and everyone has their favorite. But the way that we're going to go is the way that I've chosen because it's the easiest to document. It's the easiest to be able to replicate. It's the easiest for you guys to take home and be able to set up in your own environment. Okay, so quick role playing, and if anyone's smiling right now, that's not what you're thinking. You've been fired. Okay, you're now getting back into the industry to be able to try to attain new employment, or you're just trying to get into the industry, and you're probably going to go through the interview process several times. One of the questions that you're going to be asked is, what are you doing to either maintain or increase your relevant skill set? What are you doing to make sure that you are keeping yourself relevant and knowing how technologies work? Do you have an answer for that? Do you know what you would answer to that type of question? Because if you don't, then this talk should help you, because everyone should have a desire to learn if you're in the information security field. The only reason I'm here is because I'm addicted to learning, and this is a great field for that. So hopefully everyone here is geared the same way. The candidates for employment not only have a degree or relevant certifications, but also possess a true working knowledge to leverage their tool sets is what is needed in today's environment. I see people all the time that have great certifications because they're good at taking tests, and they've got all kinds of degrees because they're good at taking tests. But what the InfoSec community right now needs are people who understand the underlying technologies and can make it work. So what can we do to be able to fix that? What can we do to actually turn that tide and get people into fields that matter, that have that desire to learn? And one of those is making sure that you are doing your part to increase your skill set. Not everything you're going to see in a SANS course or in some training is going to be the holistic picture. You have to do your own. You have to show your own desire and get out there and learn the other pieces of it that make it work. You have to do it. You just have to get out and do it. So I forgot to change that. But here's a recent article. Well, it's not too recent. I guess it's been 3 or 4 months ago. CSO, self-taught hackers rule. They understand this. The people that matter, the people that are in charge of hiring, understand this. They know that people that are driven on their own are better than those that are just good at learning. Okay. Goes on, better cybersecurity depends on better white hat hackers and on governments worldwide upping the consequences for flouting rigorous security standards. Goes on to say, what's it take to be a good hacker? If you want to be really good at hacking, you have to work and learn and work and learn all your times behind the keyboard, right? And how many of us is that the case? Hopefully I get quite a few hands, all right? So that's the way we should be. But, it's kind of a demeanor in some places, but in others I've been in, not so much. He goes on to say, are there any superior programs? How many of you have gone through an offensive security course? Okay. OSCP, OSCE. Great courses. Offensive security guys, he says here basically that these guys don't compromise. Their motto is try harder. If you want something that's going to challenge you and really get you into the field, I recommend the offensive security courses as well. And they will definitely challenge you. So how can you get there? Practice, practice, practice. And how can you get that practice? Well, hopefully you don't go park in this parking lot. But that could happen. What we want to do is we want to set up a virtual lab. We want to do this legitimately, right? We want to do it ethically. So let's set up a virtual lab, and the cost is well worth the gain. There are many open source solutions out there. We're going to cover a few of those. I'll provide all the resources and everything that you need to be able to find them on your own. This slide deck has already been uploaded, and I'll have the link to that on one of the final slides, so you don't have to worry about taking pictures of all the links and everything else. Okay, it'll already be out there for you, and you can go and pull it down yourself. Many tool sets and distributions are out there. Virtual machines are the primary medium. I mean, you can download ISOs for Kali, but you can also download VMs. You can download ISOs for Deft and Kane and some of the forensics, but you can also download them in VMs. VMs are starting to become more and more the way that people distribute their tool sets. And given as broad as information security is, you need to understand how it works. But a wide variety of vulnerable environments are also available. So say you're tasked, how many of you are red teamers or pen testers? Okay, a few of you. How many of you are forensics type folks or want to get into forensics, right? How many of you are blue teamers? All right, so good mixed crowd. There's something out there for one. I know that in the past, I didn't have any experience pen testing a SIP environment. So what did I do? I went out and I found a vulnerable SIP environment VM. I booted it up and I learned how to pen test VIP before I did it in prod, right? It's usually a safe bet. I didn't want to take down prod, but those are the kind of use cases that we have. Another reason, everything is going virtual. When you look at the way things are going, greener environments, they're all going more virtual. So if you're not testing yourself in a virtual environment, you're not testing yourself in what's coming up and what's actually being implemented in data centers now. So quick definitions of terms for those that are not aware. And yes, I will be reading for the slides for these for just a little bit, but we'll try to make sure everyone understands the basic terms before we head on. So a hypervisor is a virtual machine monitor. It's generally a piece of computer software, firmware, or hardware that creates and runs virtual machines. A computer on which a hypervisor is running is defined as a host machine. The virtual machines that run on this host are referred to as guest machines. A virtual machine, for those that don't know, is a software-based emulation of a computer, and it'll generally operate based on architecture and functions of a real computer. You have to tell it how much hard drive space that you want it to have allocated to it, how much RAM you want it to have allocated, how many CPU cores you want to have it allocated to it. A snapshot of preserves the state and the virtual machine, including pretty much everything related to it at that point in time. All the data that's stored in RAM, all the data that's stored on disk, it just snapshots it. It's not necessarily, like a selfie. It's more of a situation where you're creating a restore point that you can come back to. Why are those valuable in virtualization? Yes, exactly, right. So if you have a lab that's a hardware lab and you screw up one of those boxes, it takes a couple hours to get it back up and running, right? Virtualization, you can have that snapshotted, hit a button, revert back to that. They make our lives much easier. So it's much easier to learn. So 3 different ways that networking is generally configured within a virtual machine are bridge, NAT, and host only. Each one is configured in a specific way. Bridge will basically, it says it binds the virtual network adapter directly to the physical Ethernet adapter. The VM will obtain a DHCP lease from the physical network. So it will look like you have 2 separate systems on that network, right? NAT is network address translation. It binds the virtual network adapter behind the NAT environment, obtains the internal DHCP address, shares a physical Ethernet adapter's public IP address for external communication. So just like your home wireless router, you have an internal IP address, but you can still communicate internally and externally. Host only is behind NAT, but you have no egress or ingress for that network. Okay, so you get an internal network communication only. DHCP lease is obtained. You cannot get out. All right, so let's get into the technical of how we're going to set this up. We're gonna have a short little structure. We're going to look at hardware considerations, what you're going to think of you're going to need to be able to set up an environment like this. We'll look at the different virtualization platforms that you may want to utilize, and then we're going to set up a VMware ESXi server. Okay. Offensive and forensics distributions, we'll look at a few of those and get you some links to those. I know most of you have probably played with a few of those on the list there, Kali, Samurai, WTF, SIFT. Then we'll look at some virtual appliances, and then we'll look at some vulnerable distributions that will help you be able to test. Metasploit 2, no WASP, things of that sort. All right, so hardware considerations. This system is what all of this is going to be running on today, and we will hopefully do a live demo. We'll see how that goes, all right? But while the CPU speeds do matter, that's one of the things that's always asked of, when someone's wanting to set something up is how much CPU do I need? They really don't matter as much as RAM and hard drive space, right? Hypervisors are pretty much all memory hogs. There are some that are much better than others, but hypervisors are generally all memory hogs. They're going to require a lot of RAM. VMs, very drastically in size. You can get very, very small, like DSL, damn small Linux, or you can go all the way up to having a Windows 8.1 VM that takes 20 gigs of hard drive space just for the core OS, right? So they vary very drastically in size, and so that's a big consideration. Sufficient power supply too. You don't want to melt anything down. All right. So virtualization platforms. Some of the ones that you've heard of. My virtualization platform that everything you'll be seeing is running on today is running on top of VMware Fusion. Okay. VMware Player Workstation run on Windows and Mac or Windows and Linux. ESXi and ESX are good server environments. ESXi you can get with a community license, so you don't have to pay anything for it. You can use it for educational purposes. Parallels is another one that people generally like running on a Mac, so there are strong camps in either direction. I don't want to argue about how that goes and which one's better than the other, but they both have their advantages and disadvantages. Oracle VirtualBox is a good open source option for you as well. It's cross-platform. Proxmox is another great one, and you can do a lot of virtualization with it with less hardware. It's better on memory, and so it's a good one. Zen Server is another one that you may want to also consider. Pretty much all of these out there are free, or at least the VMware Fusion, VMware Workstation, Parallels, you're going to pay for those, right? The rest of these you can pretty much get with and the ESXi server, but the rest of these you can get fairly cheap. You just have to register, get your product key, and register that. It's not all inclusive. There are many other options. Red Hat, and there are all kinds of different virtualization platforms. But what we're going to cover here is primarily things that you guys can attain and get fairly cheap. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set up an ESXi server. We're going to set the ESXi hypervisor on top of VMware Fusion on this MacBook Pro. And the system specs on this system are a Core i7, 2 gigahertz, 16 gigs of RAM, 500 gig hard drive. Okay. The ESXi, again, is free for educational purposes, so anyone can pull that down. So what we're going to do is we've pulled down the VMware ESXi ISO image, and that is on the host system. And we're going to create a new virtual machine for VMware on top of VMware Fusion. Set the ESXi ISO as the boot media for the new VM that we've just created, and then just so you know, this is demonstration purposes only. Please do not take out of this room that I want you to set up an ESXi server on top of Fusion. Okay, go home and do it on bare metal. Okay, it's like stacking chairs when you could use a ladder. It's not really efficient, it's not really effective, but it works good for demo purposes, so that's why we're doing it here. I don't want to try to have to get out of the network and get into an external system, and we know everything that's been hitting the networks recently, so that's why we're doing it this way. But you can set this up on bare metal at home, set up a server, you can have VMs running all the time. They can be things for your lab, or they can be things that actually serve a purpose within your environment. Once you start seeing all the options that are out there, you may find some things that are useful for your home environment that actually you can run with. So we're going to get into some screenshots. Okay, it's going to take a little bit to go through this if we just installed it during the time we have here. So I've already gone through that process. This is what it starts looking like when we boot up. We're going to continue going through, and we're going to hit enter to accept. You have to hit F11 here to get into accept the defaults, but if you hit F11 on your Mac inside of VMware, it's just going to laugh at you. So you have to escape out and use the menu, go to virtual machine, send key, F11, and that'll forward you on to the next one. So it's going to scan through, it's going to look at the hardware. You can see right there that I've delegated 100 gigs of my 500 gig hard drive to that specific VM. Set the US default, set my root password.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
When you're talking about your allocation, is that physical hardware or is that virtual?
So this is 100 gigs of space on my physical 500 gig drive, but it's actually setting it within VMware Fusion. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it segments it out, right? I mean, it's a bunch of little files, but yes, it's 100 gigs of space that I cannot utilize for anything else. All right, so we set the root password. It goes through scanning again. It then wants to validate again that I do want to format this drive. So we're going to go through the menu system again, hit F11, and it installs. Then tells you that you need to remove the CD-ROM from the system for it to reboot. Again, you want to go back out to the menu and go down to under the virtual machine menu, go to your CD, DVD drive, and then tell it to disconnect that, and then hit enter. It'll reboot. Takes a little while to boot back up. Once it gets loaded back up, it gives you right here on the screen the IP that you're going to be connecting to. Okay, so your IP is right there. Scratch it down because, well, you'll have it running anyway, but scratch it down because you're going to need that in a little bit to connect back to it. All right, so ESXi Management. One of my beliefs is that there's a one of the problems I have with the ESXi is that it requires a Windows fat client to manage it. I'm not big on running Windows within my environment, but that's one of the options here. So I don't need another physical box if I can set up a VM that's Windows to manage my VM hypervisor. Okay, so it's like, again, anyone seen Inception? We'll get into a little bit of that here. All right, so the ESXi management, once we get in there, what is going on? All my pictures are gone. Oh well. Anyway, so we've gone through this part. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set up a Windows 8 VM with VMware vSphere client and then the VMware vCenter converter standalone, and those will help us manage that. And this will just be our management VM. This VM again is sitting on top of our VMware Fusion environment. Okay, it's outside of the hypervisor because it has to manage the hypervisor. All of the VMs that we're setting up are in a NATed environment, so they are able to communicate outside, but they are behind a NAT because we're going to have virtual machines in here. I don't want them on the edge and people attacking workstations within my, guest workstations within my machine. So make sure you stay NATed. If you go bridged, you're going to open yourself up. And I wish all my memes were showing up. They would be much funnier. Anyway, so further information. This is how we're going to set it up. We're going ahead and setting up a Windows 8.1 ISO image from the MacBook Pro's hardware. We're going to create a new virtual machine within VMware Fusion. And then we're going to go ahead and set that 8.1 ISO as the boot media for the VMware server. We're going to go ahead and boot that up. And so we need more screenshots. All right, so here we go. We're setting up Windows. It's all pretty. It asks us how much hard drive space we want. So it goes through the process. VMware Fusion works really well with Windows. It'll reboot it. Once it comes back up, it automatically installs VMware tools for us, which is awesome. Saves a step, and it reboots again, and then you get to back to being able to log in. So, I'm not a fan, right? But we have to do it for this environment. So we go ahead and we set that up. What I'm doing here is I've got the executable for the vSphere client on my core MacBook Pro, and I'm going to drag that over to the desktop of this Windows 8.1 VM that we just set up. It copies in because of VMware Tools, makes that very, very handy, so we're going to go ahead and install that now. So next. Oh, you have to accept, right? Read the whole thing and accept, right? Don't disobey. Don't need people like cutting tags off mattresses and stuff. All right, so keep hitting next, and next, finish. Once it's done. All right, yay. We've got our system pretty much set up to be able to manage this this ESXi server now. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in our IP address, our username and password. Username again was root because that's the only account we have on the ESXi server at this point. So put in root, the password, and we accept the certificate, and we boot up. And it tells us that we are now in a trial mode, okay, for 60 days. I'm going to show you how you can go in and put that key in because it is a needle in a haystack. If you haven't done it before, it's a pain to find. So, yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bring up the ESXi server through the vSphere client. We're going to register VMware ESXi server through the vSphere client, and then we're going to again use the key that we got when we registered our ESXi executable that we pulled down. So when we come through, first screen up at the top, you can't read it, I'm sure, but it says inventory up there. You're going to go ahead and click on that, and on the next screen in the menu on the left where the little cursor is, if you can see it, says licensed features. So you go in there, and then go to the configuration tab, and then at the far right side of the configuration tab, there's a little edit link. Okay? How many of you would have found that on the first try? Probably not many, unless you've set it up before. It is a pain in the tail to find. So once we get in there, we're going to go ahead and put in our product key, and no, that is not legitimate. You can feel free to try, but yeah, I knew my audience, so yeah, that's not going to work for you. You need to take a picture of that one? I should just made it say ONSI all the way across. All right, so once we get that set up, we're logged in, and you can look at the bottom right-hand corner. It no longer tells us that we are in a trial mode. If you look just prior to that, it says evaluation mode, 60 days remaining. That goes away. So we're in, we're managing it. What do we do with it now? What we're going to do is we're going to set up the VMware vCenter Converter standalone application on our Windows 8.1 VM, our management VM. And what this will allow us to do is be able to import and convert VM images onto the ESXi server. Okay. It'll also transfer them over. So you can go and pull down the vCenter converter, and we're going to save that and go ahead and run it directly from the system. Yes, next, next. Go back and read that and hit accept, and then next, next, install, and we're going to go through the process. It's almost done, and done. All right. So now this is our vCenter Converter standalone application, and so what we need now are some distributions to be able to either bring into this or to attack with. What we're going to cover first are offensive VMs. So how many of you have used Kali? All right, awesome. So there are quite a few very good offensive VMs that you can pull down. Arch Assault, Pin2, Samurai WTF, Mobisec, if you like to test mobile applications, Backbox Linux, Backboontoo, Black Arch Remnix, Sift, Deft, and Kane. There's all kinds of them to choose from, and again, later in the slides, there will be direct links to each of those that were valid as of this morning. So if you want to go out and pull some of those down, you'll be able to. All right, so everyone knows the terminal in Kali. There's a quick screenshot within Samurai WTF. Every offensive virtual distribution has its strengths and weaknesses. So depending on what you're testing or what you're wanting to learn will depend on which distro you're going to want to run. But there are many great tool sets out there that will save you tons of time. Most of us that do this professionally will modify heavily the distributions that we're running on to have the tool sets that we want to have every time. Having that in a VM with snapshotting makes things much easier to keep us from having to do that every time. So there are virtual appliances that you can pull down as well. Vieta is a great router that you can pull down if you want to get into Cisco stuff. Vieta is great to be able to learn some ACLs and things of that sort. pfSense, how many of you use pfSense? Awesome firewall. There's IPSs, IDSs, the Security Onion. Anyone used it, right? Alien Vault, OSSM is a great SIM. So there are all kinds of open source options for us to be able to get out there and utilize those and be able to play with them in our environment. If you don't have the understanding of what a SIM is and you're applying for a role that manages a SIM, then it may be in your best interest to pull down OSM, run some junk through your network, see what it pulls out, or point logs to it and run some junk through it. I generally always keep Security Onion on a VM on my box. The reason being is I can use TCP replay, throw a PCAP through it, and watch what all Security Onion pulls out with Snort and all of its predefined rules and things of that sort that we've got set up in it. It's amazing. It saves you tons of time of manually picking apart a VM or picking apart a PCAP. So these things make our lives very easy if you learn to use them effectively. inside the vSphere client, I believe, there is a VMware Virtual Appliances Marketplace you can go out to and take a look at that. I've also got a couple links to other lists of VMware or virtual appliances that you can utilize on the following slides, but virtual appliances are great. Now, for vulnerable distributions, this used to be a thorn in my side. They were very hard to find. They were sparse all over the place, and it was hard to know whether or not you were going to get a legitimate one, or if you're going to get one that someone else had preloaded to try to egos traffic out of your network, because that happened quite a bit. Thanks to many great people, we have some amazing vulnerable distributions that are out there, and I'd like to give a special thanks specifically to the guys at VulnHub for being able to put all of these together in one place. How many of you have gone to VulnHub? Awesome. So VulnHub is an amazing resource. It's put together by Got Milk, who's in this room. I don't know if he wants to be recognized or not, but amazing work by those guys, and they really have put a ton of work into it, and they deserve a round of applause for putting that together. For anyone that does that stuff, it's awesome. And he's given me a few stickers. I'll put them up here on the table. If anyone wants those during the end of the talk, you can feel free to come up and snag them. Don't run something like DVO on your primary box, or as as something that you're bridged out onto the network. Make sure you run this stuff responsibly. These things are inherently vulnerable. They're made to get popped. You put it on the edge and you're going to get popped. So make sure you protect that stuff. If you want to set up a honeypot or something for someone to be able to attack, do that, but make sure that you use something like pfSense to block them from being able to come further into your network. All right? Learning to use the virtualization, the networking components that are built into most of the hypervisors, and being able to to manage that stuff will help. So what we're going to do for this portion of it is we're going to use VulnHub. We're going to pull down a copy of Metasploitable 2 as a vulnerable guest distribution, and then we're going to pull that in through the VMware vCenter converter standalone, and we're going to convert that into the ESXi server. We're going to attack it. Okay. So basically, what we do is we go in, we pull that down. It has to be extracted. Once you get it unzipped, you've got your VMX file there. So we're going to go into the vCenter converter and then import that. So we select VMware Workstation or other VMware virtual appliance or machine is what it says. And as the item, we're going to select that VMX file. We're going to go ahead and tell it to convert it and bring it in. So we hit next, and it starts pulling that in. You then have to provide the credentials again for your ESXi server. Once you've provided those credentials, then it starts the process of transferring this or converting it and getting ready to transfer it up to the network. So you name it, hit next, continue going on, hit next. Most of these, again, are defaults, unless it's something that's pretty readily known to you already. We're just going to keep hitting next. We hit finish, and then we're going to go and look inside the vSphere client. Okay, the vSphere client, again, is what we're managing this ESXi server with. So once we get into the vSphere client, we can see that it's there, but not fully yet. Yeah, another one of my images gone. Oh. All right, so anyways, so status, you can see it's at 76% up there. It's currently loading up now, and now our vulnerable VM is now within the ESXi server. Okay, so what do we do now? We're going to go ahead and spin it up, and once we have the Metasploitable 2 VM powered on, we'll go back into the Kali VM that we have on VMware Fusion, and that's I just had that set up already, and we'll scan it, enumerate it, take a look at it. Okay, show you how you can kind of interact with it when it's actually stood up. And then from the ESXi offensive VM, we'll scan the range and just play around with it a little bit. So inside the vSphere client, basically you just come in here and you can right-click on the VM. You can select power and tell it to power it on, and it will boot up. You can actually see it'll put a little play symbol on the icon for it. And at the top left, you can also expand the tree there to be able to see it there as well, along with all of your other VMs. So let's actually spin it up and we'll take a look at it here. All right, so this is the ESXi server. I'm currently in it. I have to escape out of it. So there's, again, what you saw previously. This is running. You can see the internal DHCP scope of it. Excuse me. This is our Windows 8 management system, and hopefully I can remember the password to get back into it. Just loading the inventory, and we can look. I think I've only got a couple VMs in there right now. Metasploitable is one of those. Vulnix is another. But there are hundreds out there on VulnHub that you can get out and learn with. So we're going to right-click on that, power on. We can also power on this one as well. You can power it on just by hitting the play button up top. And now we see that both of those have the little play icons on them over here in the left menu. So they're both running. So temporarily what we're going to do is I'm just going to shut those down real fast. I want you to see that we scan that internal range, there's nothing there. And then when we go back in and scan it once they're booted up, we get results, we get things popping at us. So this is the Kali attack VM sitting on top of VMware Fusion. I typed that incorrectly. I knew I did. All right. So we see that we're 168 or 192.168.66 subnet. So we're going to scan that whole subnet. I'm just going to use Nmap. We'll let it run. So once this gets through scanning, we'll see we have very little. Let me run that. Okay, so everything finished there. We see host down all the way down the list. It's pretty much, you see nothing, right? Everything's empty. So let's go back over here and let's spin these back up. And let's give them just a second to boot, and then we'll do the same scan again and see what more information we come back with. Things should really light up for us, especially when it hits Metasploitable. Very inherently vulnerable box. So here we go. 80, 22, 443, 8100. We've got plenty of ports here lighting up like a Christmas tree. So how many of you have scanned a network before? Just done a simple scan. Okay, great. Okay, cool. If you haven't, you have no reason or no excuse not to now, right? You don't have to do it on someone else's production network. You can set this up on your own system and play around with it. Learn the tools that you're expected to know. Some of this stuff, again, is very basic, and so it's often avoided by the InfoSec community when it comes to these type of conferences. And I honestly, my outlook on it was that I thought that this talk would be too basic for this conference myself, but others felt the need to make sure that it was given because they think people will benefit from it, and I agree with them. Everyone starts somewhere, right? Everyone has to start somewhere. Yes. Right. Basically, what was said was, that every system administrator needs to understand how to run simple things like that, like Nmap, to be able to map out your environment, see what's running that you don't know is there. Because most of the time, just simply looking at one or two systems and what services they're offering is not going to show you the entire environment. Yes?
Just make sure when you decide to run it in your production, if you learn how to use it, you tell the SOC that you're going to be doing it.
Yes.
They get a little angry sometimes.
So that was make sure you inform your SOC when you're running scanning across the environment. You can trigger some alerts and scare some people. So I was going to go through a larger exploit against the Metasploitable VM, but we're running too short a time really for me to be able to go through that whole process. But you can see that it's finished scanning here. We have all kinds of information on this guy, on these two systems, and we know that there's some definite vulnerabilities within our environment now. Now it's the next step of, okay, so how do I test this, right? Get out there and learn. Teach yourself. Pull down these vulnerable VMs and do it, and you'll be amazed at what you gain from it. So let's we'll finish this guy up. Yes. No Adobe updates, right? So, congratulations. You've gone through the process of setting up a virtual testing lab with an ESXi hypervisor. You have your Windows VM to manage that hypervisor successfully and be able to put it all together. And you know where to obtain the offensive appliances and vulnerable virtual machines, or at least you will here in the next coming slides, to be able to build this out on your own and teach yourself and learn. It doesn't matter whether you're going into pen testing or blue teaming or forensics, or if you want to get into exploit development. Everything that you need to learn within information security, you can put into a virtual environment and save yourself tons of time to be able to teach yourself and further your skill set. You also know how to convert and transfer them over to your ESXi server, the vCenter client, and then VMware converter. So, and then you saw how easy it was to enumerate guests within that environment from your Kali VM. InfoSec recruiters want people that know the tool sets. They don't just need people out there that have those certifications and have the degrees. They need people that can speak intelligibly about how that works at a foundational level, and so that's what we need to do. It takes time. It's not easy, but it definitely will pay off. If it doesn't pay off monetarily for you, at least it will pay off in the long run with your skill set and your career. And in the words of Rob Schneider, and that's going to, oh, it crashed. Nice. At least that part of the demo failed. Not, yeah. So, I have the pinwheel of death. Sweet. All right. I want to get the slide back up, at least for you guys to be able to get the link, to be able to pull down the slide deck. Get that back up for you real fast. I'm going to skip Schneider. Yeah, everyone knows it. All right, so again, the links for these are in the presentation. So ESXi download, registration, player, fusion, workstation, parallels, VirtualBox, all of your offensive and you know, primary VMs that you're going to use as tools within Infosec. And then you've also got your virtual appliances here. Again, the top three there are all your lists, and then some of the bottom ones are things that I find very, very fruitful to learn from. And then I'm not going to give any more links for all the vulnerable VMs. There's so many of them. It's a huge number of them, but they've all been very well put together by the guys at VulnHub. And so make sure you go there and check it out and pull down some vulnerable VMs. One more thing, if you guys are in the area and local, go and check out HackerCon. It's coming up in just a month or so, and it's in Charleston, West Virginia. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate the time. And there we go. Quick question. Okay.
Okay. If somebody used to use ESXi in production and uses VMware Fusion each way, why do you recommend ESXi over VMware Fusion, or do you think there's inherent?
So the question again was, do I recommend ESXi over top of VMware Fusion? The reason this was presented this way is because I want you to be able to know how you can set this up on an actual physical environment as an ESXi server. VMware Fusion, while it can run all the time and have multiple VMs within it, is not easily managed without having a display on that system. So if you have and yes, and it's free. Okay, so that's a big consideration. But yeah, you can have a headless box, run an ESXi on your server, manage it remotely, do everything you want to do, and build your skill set effectively. All right, thanks guys for coming. Appreciate.